In this talk, we're going to learn about how a pathogen is able to infect a host. We're going to learn about the steps involved in the infection process and describe how pathogens can overcome host barriers, as well as how do they get into the host in the first place. Pathogens cause infections, and the first step in the infection process is the ability of the pathogen to interact with the host's bodily surfaces. Now, pathogens can enter through many different routes. So I would recommend that you pause this video here and start writing down the many different routes through which a pathogen can enter into the host, like you. Once you're done with your list, play this video and let us see how many you got correct. So the first one we're going to look at is skin. Our whole body is covered by skin, and if there is any breach in the skin, that is a perfect way for a pathogen to enter into the host. Eyes and ears are also good routes of infection for pathogens. The nose, which leads to the respiratory tract, is also a very good way for a pathogen to enter the host. The gastrointestinal tract that includes the mouth is also an excellent way for pathogens to gain entry and interact with the host. Then we do have the urogenital tract. And finally, our body has a lot of bacteria that normally stay and they form our normal flora. When there is a change in circumstances or conditions in the body, these normal flora or these normal organisms that reside with us can become opportunists and cause infections. Once a pathogen enters the host, it must be able to survive in the host in order to successfully cause an infection. Once it survives in the host, it must be able to multiply in the host and that way increase its numbers. Now, the host prevents the entry, survival, and the growth of pathogenic agents by having different types of barriers and defenses. Thus, a pathogen must be able to overcome the host barriers and defenses, and they're able to do that in a variety of ways. One way is to have structural components that allow pathogens to evade or hide from the host defenses. The other option is to have a more offensive approach where the pathogen synthesizes and secretes toxins to disable the host's defenses, which includes the host's immune system. So here we have a bacterium that we can observe, and we're going to look at bacteria as an example of some structural components. And so bacteria that cause infections a lot of times will have these hair-like structures called fimbriae or pili. And in some cases they're also called as adhesins. And these hair-like structures help the bacteria to attach to the host cells. And sometimes it even helps the bacteria to invade into the host cells and tissues. Pathogens can also have flagella. Now, flagella help the pathogen to move around. And so if there's an immune cell that's trying to catch the pathogen, well, guess what? If it has a flagellum, it'll simply swim away. And that way it can evade the host defenses. Some pathogens will have a capsule. The capsule in this case is going to be the outermost covering of that pathogen. The capsule helps the pathogen because it makes it slippery, and so host cells have a hard time grabbing onto the pathogen. And when I'm talking about host cells, I'm referring to the immune cells that are going to try to capture the pathogen and ingest it. They're unable to do that when there is a capsule because it makes the pathogen slippery. Additionally, a pathogen can have cell surface proteins that interact with the host receptors and help in the infection process. Now, the way we looked at certain structural components in bacteria, other pathogens can have similar structural components that help it infect the host. We're now going to look at some molecules that are made by pathogens to overcome host barriers and defenses. So toxins are a class of molecules that help a pathogen to infect the host. One thing to remember is that all these molecules that we've been talking about and structures we've been talking about, they all come under the umbrella of virulence factors. And whenever a pathogen has virulence factors, it promotes the infection process. In the case of certain pathogens, they can secrete molecules, which are called as exotoxins, that can disable the host. Now, these exotoxins can either be enzymes or they can be molecules that bind to the host proteins or the host cells. So exotoxins are always secreted molecules. Now, sometimes pathogens will have molecules that are part of it and have toxic effects. And these molecules are the endotoxins. So the main difference between exotoxins and endotoxins is that endotoxins are not secreted, while exotoxins are. A primary example of an endotoxin is lipopolysaccharide. Lipopolysaccharide is a component of the cell wall of gram-negative bacteria. If we look at a magnified picture of what is in that purple structure in the figure, this is what it looks like. So lipopolysaccharide is a very well-known endotoxin that generates very robust inflammatory responses and can result in a process called toxemia in the host. With this, we come to the end of different ways by which a pathogen can enter the host and different structures and toxins that are produced by pathogens to be able to overcome host barriers and defenses.